The billionaire stood on the edge of the bridge, ready to end it all. But then a poor little girl selling candy approached and whispered just one sentence that changed his life forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The wind howled across the Golden Gate Bridge as Marcus Harrison gripped the cold metal railing. At 32, he'd lost everything. 48 hours ago, he was worth $3 billion. Now, federal agents had frozen every account, seized every property, and destroyed his name. His CFO, David Chen, had been running an insider trading scheme for years, using Marcus's credentials for every illegal transaction. By the time Marcus discovered it, the damage was done. The feds didn't care that he was innocent. The media didn't care. Even his own mother had called earlier that evening, her voice breaking through the phone. "I can't look at you anymore, Marcus. You've destroyed everything your father built." The line went dead. Marcus climbed onto the lower railing, his designer suit whipping in the wind. The black water churned below, promising an end to the crushing weight in his chest. No more lawsuits, no more shame, no more disappointed faces. He lifted one foot to swing over. "Mister!" The small voice made him freeze. He turned his head slowly. A little girl stood 10 feet away, maybe 7 years old, wearing a thin pink jacket with holes in it. She clutched a cardboard box of candy bars to her chest, her dark curls pulled into a messy ponytail. Her brown eyes were impossibly wide in the dim lamplight. "What are you doing up there?" she asked softly. "Go away, kid," Marcus said, his voice rough. "This doesn't concern you." She didn't move. Instead, she took a step closer. "Are you trying to jump?" Marcus turned away, jaw clenched. "I said leave." My mama died 63 days ago," the girl said quietly. Marcus's hands tightened on the railing. He didn't want to hear this. The cancer took her real fast. 3 months from diagnosis to gone. I sell candy to help my foster mom with rent. But back then, I was trying to help pay for Mama's medicine. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Despite himself, Marcus looked back. Tears streamed down her small face, but she wasn't sobbing. She just stood there, crying silently, holding that box like it was precious. "I wanted to give up too," she whispered. "After Mama died, I didn't want to live anymore. Nobody's my mama now, and it hurts so much that sometimes I can't breathe." Marcus's vision blurred. His throat tightened. The girl stepped forward. "But you know what Mama told me the night before she died? She said our lives aren't just for us. Every person we meet, every smile we give, every kind thing we do, it all matters. She said even when we're gone, the love we gave keeps living in the people we touched." Her voice broke. She said I had to keep living because somebody out there needed the light I could give them. Something cracked inside Marcus's chest. "My name is Sophie," the girl said, wiping her eyes. "Sophie Chen. And I think maybe you're supposed to live too. Because maybe somebody out there needs your light, even if you can't see it right now." Chen. The same last name as the man who destroyed everything. Marcus's whole body started shaking, not from cold, from something breaking loose inside him. Sophie reached into her box and pulled out a chocolate bar. "This is my last one for tonight. I was saving it to eat at home, but I think you need it more than me." She held it out, her small hand trembling, and Marcus Harrison, who had lost billions of dollars and everything he'd built, began to cry. Real, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire frame. Slowly, carefully, he climbed down from the railing. Sophie rushed forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, barely reaching his chest. "It's okay," she whispered. "Mama used to say that sometimes we have to fall apart before we can put ourselves back together the right way." Marcus sank to his knees on the cold concrete. This 7-year-old girl who had lost everything held him while he shattered. Eventually, his breathing steadied. The sobs turned to shaky breaths. Sophie pulled back and looked at him seriously. You're not gonna jump now, right? Marcus shook his head. Good, she said firmly, pressing the chocolate bar into his hand. Because I think you're gonna do something really important someday. I can feel it. Something shifted inside him as he looked into her eyes. Not hope, not yet, but a tiny spark in the darkness. Where are your foster parents? He asked, voice hoarse. Does anyone know you're out here? Sophie's face fell. Mrs. Patterson thinks I'm sleeping. But I can't sleep most nights, so I come out to sell candy. We need the money. A 7-year-old orphan selling candy on San Francisco streets at 3 in the morning. While he'd been ready to throw away his life, this child was fighting for hers. Sophie, he said quietly, I think you just saved my life. She smiled, a real smile that lit up her face. Does that mean we're friends now? Despite everything, Marcus felt his mouth twitch. Yeah, kid, I think it does. Good, because friends help each other, and I think maybe we both need help right now. Marcus pulled out his wallet. His cards were frozen, but he had $43 in cash, everything left in the world. He pulled out 2 20s. For your rent, he said. Sophie's eyes went wide. That's too much. It's all I have right now. She took the money carefully, then looked up with those impossibly wise eyes. Are you going to be okay? Do you have somewhere to go? His penthouse was seized, his cars gone, his friends had stopped calling. I'll figure something out, he said. Sophie frowned, clearly not believing him. She pulled out a crumpled paper and stubby pencil, wrote something down and handed it to him. This is Mrs. Patterson's address. If you need help, you can find me there. Promise you'll remember. Marcus looked at the childish handwriting, throat tight. I promise. Sophie nodded, then took his hand. Come on. I'll walk with you off the bridge. We can go together. Marcus Harrison walked hand in hand with Sophie Chen, away from the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge, and back toward a life he wasn't sure he wanted. But as they walked, Sophie chattering about organizing her candy display, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 48 hours. He felt seen. They reached the end of the bridge. Sophie squeezed his hand. You're going to be okay. I know it. How? Marcus whispered. Sophie smiled. Because you got back down. That's the hardest part. Everything else, you just take one step at a time. She waved and disappeared into the fog, leaving Marcus standing alone. But he wasn't alone, not really. In his hand was a chocolate bar from a child who had nothing but still chose to give. In his pocket was an address, a lifeline he desperately needed. Marcus looked back at the bridge one more time, then walked away. He had no money, no home, no plan, but he had a reason to try. What Marcus didn't know was that his decision to step down would set in motion events that would expose a conspiracy reaching far deeper than he imagined. And little Sophie Chen, who sold candy and saved lives, held the key to everything. Marcus spent that first night on a bench in Golden Gate Park, the chocolate bar still clutched in his hand. He couldn't bring himself to eat it. It felt sacred somehow, a reminder that someone believed his life was worth saving. As dawn broke over San Francisco, reality hit him hard. He had $3 left, no phone, the feds had seized it, and nowhere to go. His expensive suit marked him as out of place among the homeless community that stirred around him. First time sleeping rough? An older man asked, settling onto the bench beside him. His weathered face told stories of hard years. That obvious? Marcus asked. You still got that shocked look. I'm Jimmy, been out here 6 years. He offered a cigarette, which Marcus declined. What's your story? Marcus hesitated, then figured it didn't matter anymore. Lost everything. My business partner committed fraud using my name. Feds think I was in on it. Jimmy whistled low. That's rough. You got a lawyer? Had one, can't afford him now. Marcus stared at his hands. I was worth over $2 billion on Tuesday. Today's Thursday, and I'm sleeping on a bench. Money comes and goes, Jimmy said philosophically. Question is, what kind of man are you without it? Before Marcus could answer, his stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Jimmy chuckled. St. Mary's serves breakfast at 7. Come on, I'll show you. As they walked, Marcus thought about Sophie's words, one step at a time. This was his first step, accepting help from a homeless man to get a free meal. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. At St. Mary's soup kitchen, Marcus stood in line with dozens of others. The smell of oatmeal and coffee filled the air. A volunteer, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, smiled as she served him. First time here, sweetheart? She asked gently. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. It's okay. We all need help sometimes. I'm Ruth. You come back anytime you need to, you hear? As Marcus ate his first meal in days, he watched the volunteers moving between tables, offering seconds, chatting warmly with people who society had forgotten. These people saw humans, not statistics. Just like Sophie had seen him, not as a fallen billionaire, but as someone who needed saving. After breakfast, Marcus pulled out the crumpled paper with Sophie's address. He had to know she was okay, that she'd made it home safe. The address led him to a run-down apartment building in the Tenderloin district. Marcus climbed 3 flights of stairs and knocked on Unit 304. The woman who answered was in her 50s, wearing a tired expression and a waitress uniform. Can I help you? Mrs. Patterson? I'm a friend of Sophie's. I met her last night and wanted to make sure she got home safely. Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted to concern mixed with suspicion. Sophie was out last night? She told me she was sleeping. She was selling candy near the bridge, Marcus said carefully, around 3 a.m. Mrs. Patterson closed her eyes, pain crossing her face. That child. I've told her it's not safe, but she's so determined to help with bills. She looked at Marcus more carefully. Wait, you're that man from the news. The billionaire who... Yeah, Marcus interrupted. That's me, but Sophie didn't know that. She helped me. That sounds like Sophie. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. She's at school right now. Washington Elementary, gets out at 3. Thank you, Marcus said. He turned to leave, then paused. Mrs. Patterson? She's a special kid. The world needs more people like her. I know, the woman said quietly. I just wish I could give her more. Her mother was my cousin. When she died, I took Sophie in, but I'm barely making ends meet as it is. That's why Sophie feels like she has to. Her voice broke. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. An old instinct, one that had made him billions. The instinct to see problems and solve them. I'll come back, he said. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to help. Sophie saved my life last night. I owe her that. Marcus spent the day walking the streets of San Francisco, really seeing the city for the first time. Not from the window of a Tesla or through the glass walls of his penthouse. He saw the struggle, the hustle, the humanity, street vendors selling flowers, tacos, handmade jewelry, people working 3 jobs to afford studio apartments, artists performing for spare change. This was the real economy, the one he'd built an empire on top of without ever understanding the foundation. Around 2:30, Marcus found himself outside Washington Elementary. He sat on a bench across the street, watching as children poured out of the building at 3 o'clock. Sophie emerged with a small group of kids, her backpack almost as big as she was. She was laughing at something a friend said, and Marcus felt his chest tighten. This child, who had every reason to be broken, still found joy. He was about to call out to her when a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized the man who stepped out. David Chen, his former CFO, the man who'd destroyed his life. But Chen wasn't in handcuffs. He was wearing an expensive suit, looking perfectly comfortable and free. Sophie's face lit up. "Uncle David." "Uncle?" Marcus watched, frozen, as Sophie ran to Chen and hugged him. Chen picked her up, spinning her around, then set her down and handed her an ice cream cone from somewhere. They talked for a few minutes. Marcus was too far away to hear. Then Chen got back in his SUV and drove away. Sophie waved until he disappeared around the corner. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Sophie was David Chen's niece. The man who'd framed him, who'd stolen everything, was related to the little girl who'd saved his life. This couldn't be a coincidence. Sophie turned to cross the street and spotted Marcus. Her face broke into a huge smile. "Marcus!" She ran over, ice cream dripping down her hand. "You're here! I was worried about you all day." "Hey, Sophie," Marcus managed, his mind racing. "I see you had a visitor." "Oh, Uncle David, he's so nice. He always brings me treats and gives Aunt Lisa money for rent. He says he's going to take me to Disneyland soon." Sophie beamed. "He's my daddy's brother. I don't see him much because he's really busy with important work stuff, but when he visits, it's the best." Marcus felt sick. David Chen was playing the generous uncle while simultaneously destroying lives and letting Marcus take the fall. And sweet, innocent Sophie had no idea. "That's great, kid," Marcus said, forcing a smile. "Hey, how was school?" Sophie launched into a story about her math test, while Marcus's brain worked overtime. David Chen visiting Sophie regularly, giving money to Mrs. Patterson. Why? Out of actual family obligation, or was there something more? And then it hit him like lightning. Sophie's mother had been David's sister-in-law. She died 3 months ago, right around the time the fraud investigation started. What if Sophie's mother had known something? What if David was keeping tabs on Sophie to make sure she didn't know anything dangerous? "Marcus," Sophie was looking at him with concern. "You okay? You look weird." "Just thinking," Marcus said. He knelt down to her level. "Sophie, did your mom ever talk about your Uncle David, about his work?" Sophie scrunched up her face, thinking. "Sometimes. Mama worked for him for a while before she got sick. She was his executive assistant. That's the word. She helped him with meetings and stuff." Marcus's heart raced. Sophie's mother had been David's executive assistant. She would have had access to everything. Files, emails, transactions. "Did your mom leave you anything?" Marcus asked carefully. "Papers, maybe? A computer?" "Aunt Lisa has a box of Mama's stuff," Sophie said. "Why?" "Just curious," Marcus said, his mind already working through possibilities. "Hey, Sophie, you trust me, right?" "Of course," Sophie said immediately. "You're my friend." "Good, because I need you to do something for me, but you can't tell anyone about it, not even Uncle David, okay?" Sophie's eyes went wide, but she nodded seriously. "Okay, I need to see that box of your mama's things. Can you help me with that?" 2 days later, Marcus met Sophie in the back alley behind her apartment building. She'd brought a cardboard box that had seen better days, Lisa's stuff written on the side in marker. "Aunt Lisa thinks this is at my friend Emma's house for a school project," Sophie whispered conspiratorially. "We have to bring it back tonight." "We will," Marcus promised. "I just need to look through it." They sat in the corner of the alley as Marcus opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, some jewelry, Sophie's baby book, and a laptop. "Does this work?" Marcus asked, holding up the computer. "I don't know. Aunt Lisa doesn't have internet, so we never use it." Marcus pressed the power button. Nothing. He'd need to charge it, which meant finding somewhere with power and Wi-Fi. The public library. But it didn't open until 9 a.m. tomorrow. He dug deeper into the box. Beneath the photos was a journal, a simple composition notebook with a floral cover. Marcus opened it carefully. The first entries were mundane, grocery lists, appointment reminders, Sophie's school schedule, but as Marcus flipped through, the entries changed. March 15th. David asked me to create a second set of books today, said it was for internal projections. Something feels wrong. March 22nd, I found transactions that don't match the official reports, millions of dollars moving to offshore accounts. When I asked David, he said it was above my pay grade. April 3rd, I made copies. I don't know what to do with them. I'm scared. April 10th, doctor confirmed it's stage 4. Maybe this is God's way of taking me before I have to make this impossible choice. Marcus's hands trembled as he read. Sophie's mother had known. She'd discovered the fraud and made copies. What does it say? Sophie asked, trying to see. Your mama was a very brave woman, Marcus said softly. She found out something important, something that could help a lot of people. Like superhero stuff. Sophie's eyes lit up. Yeah, kid, like superhero stuff. The last entry in the journal made Marcus's breath catch. April 18th. I hid everything where only Sophie would think to look, in the place we shared our secrets. If something happens to me, I pray she finds it when she's old enough to understand. I pray she forgives me for not being braver while I was alive. Sophie, Marcus said carefully, did you and your mama have a special place? Somewhere you'd go together, just the two of you? Sophie's face brightened, then fell. The pier. Pier 39. We'd go feed the sea lions. Mama said they reminded her that even when life gets hard, you can still find a reason to play and be silly. Did you have a favorite spot there? Yeah! The bench by the carousel. Mama carved our initials into the bottom of it one time. She said it was our secret spot forever and ever. Marcus stood up, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Sophie, how would you like to visit the sea lions tomorrow? The next morning, Marcus and Sophie took the bus to Pier 39. Marcus had spent the night in the library bathroom after closing, waiting to break in. A crime he never thought he'd commit, just to charge Sophie's mother's laptop. But the files were password protected, and he'd had to give up and leave before security found him. Now, walking through the tourist crowds, Marcus felt exposed. His face had been all over the news. Someone could recognize him any moment. But Sophie held his hand tightly, chattering about the sea lions, and he forced himself to focus. They reached the bench by the carousel. Sophie pointed proudly at the bottom, where someone had carved LC plus SC in a heart. See? Mama was Lisa Chen, and I'm Sophie Chen. Marcus got down on his knees and felt under the bench. Nothing. He checked the back, the sides. Nothing. His heart sank. Maybe the journal had been the ravings of a scared, sick woman. Maybe there was no evidence. Marcus, look. Sophie pointed to the trash can next to the bench. That's new. There used to be a different one here, a green one with a broken lid. Marcus's pulse quickened. He looked around. There were workers doing maintenance along the pier. He approached one, a young guy with a name tag reading Jake. Excuse me, do you know what happened to the old trash can that was here? Jake shrugged. Pier storage, probably. We keep old stuff in the warehouse under the pier. Why? Just curious. I proposed to my wife next to it years ago. Marcus lied smoothly. Sentimental, you know? Jake grinned. Romantic. The warehouse entrance is over there, past the t-shirt shop, but it's locked. Employees only. Marcus nodded, thinking fast. Then Sophie tugged his sleeve. Marcus, I need to use the bathroom. Can you wait? Of course, kid. I'll be right here. As soon as Sophie left, Marcus made his decision. He walked to the warehouse entrance. The door had a simple lock, nothing like the security he'd had at Connect Stream. He looked around. No cameras on this particular door. Lucky. Marcus pulled a paperclip from his pocket. He'd grabbed a handful from the library and worked the lock. It took 3 tries, but it clicked open. Inside, the warehouse was dim and musty, filled with old pier equipment. Marcus searched frantically, checking trash cans. Green, green. There, a green trash can with a broken lid. He pulled it out and flipped it over. Nothing obvious. He checked inside. Empty. He was about to give up when he noticed the bottom wasn't sitting flush. He pulled, and the false bottom came away. Inside was a USB drive in a plastic bag, along with a letter. Marcus grabbed both and shoved them in his pocket just as he heard voices outside. He quickly replaced everything and slipped out a side door, his heart hammering. Sophie was waiting by the bench, looking worried. "Where did you go?" "Just looking around. Come on, let's go see the sea lions like we planned." They spent an hour watching the sea lions bark and play, and Marcus tried to act normal even though his pocket felt like it was burning. This USB drive could be everything, or it could be nothing. But he had to know. That evening, after returning Sophie safely home, Marcus went back to the library. He waited in the bathroom stall again until closing, then emerged in the darkness. At a computer in the back corner, Marcus plugged in the USB drive with shaking hands. It opened without a password. Inside were hundreds of files, bank statements, offshore account records, emails between David Chen and board members, wire transfer authorizations, all bearing Marcus's forged signature, and a video file. Marcus clicked it. Lisa Chen's face appeared, looking gaunt and tired. The date stamp showed it was recorded just days before she died. "My name is Lisa Chen," she said, her voice weak but steady. "I'm recording this as insurance. My brother-in-law, David Chen, has been systematically defrauding ConnectStream for 3 years, using CEO Marcus Harrison's digital signature and credentials. I know because he had me facilitate it. I thought I was helping with legitimate business until I realized the truth." She coughed, and Marcus saw the IV pole in the background. "I'm dying. I don't have time to go to the authorities the right way, and I'm scared of what David might do to my daughter if he knows I have this evidence, so I'm hiding it. If someone finds this, please protect my Sophie. She's innocent, she knows nothing, and please clear Mr. Harrison's name. Whatever his faults, he didn't do this. David did, and I helped him. God forgive me." The video ended. Marcus sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. Here it was, everything he needed to prove his innocence. Everything he needed to get his life back. But David Chen was still out there, still free, still visiting Sophie with ice cream and promises. And now Marcus had to figure out how to bring down a man who'd already proven he was willing to destroy anyone who got in his way, without putting a 7-year-old girl in danger. Marcus spent 3 days studying every file on that USB drive in the library after hours. He'd become a ghost, living in the shadows, sleeping in storage rooms and bathroom stalls, carefully avoiding security cameras. The evidence was damning and complete. David hadn't just committed fraud. He'd been running a massive Ponzi scheme, using ConnectStream's legitimate success to hide a parallel operation that had swindled investors out of over $800 million. Marcus had been the perfect fall guy. Young, ambitious, with a reputation for aggressive business tactics. When the scheme collapsed, everyone believed he'd been behind it. But now Marcus faced an impossible choice. If he went to the FBI with this evidence, they'd immediately investigate. David would know the evidence had surfaced, and David would know Sophie's mother had been the one who'd collected it. Sophie could be in danger. On the 4th day, Marcus met Sophie at their usual spot in the park. She'd been bringing him food from school lunch, sandwiches and fruit she'd squirrel away. She thought it was a fun, secret game. Marcus tried not to think about how he was depending on a 7-year-old's stolen lunch to survive. "Hey, kid," he said as she settled next to him on the bench. "Can I ask you something serious?" "Sure." Sophie bit into an apple. "When your Uncle David visits, does he ever ask you about your mama, about things she might have left you?" Sophie thought about it. "Sometimes. Last time he asked if Mama had any work papers at home. I said no, because Aunt Lisa already gave me the box, and it's at Emma's house." She paused. "Well, it was. We brought it back, remember?" Marcus's blood ran cold. What exactly did you tell him? I said Mama just left normal stuff, pictures and jewelry in her computer. He asked about the computer, but I said it doesn't work. Sophie looked worried. Did I do something wrong? No, Sophie, you did perfect. Marcus's mind raced. David was fishing for information. He suspected Lisa had kept evidence, but he didn't know for sure, and he didn't know where it was. Yet. Marcus, can I tell you a secret? Sophie asked quietly. Always. Uncle David scares me sometimes. He's nice, but there's something in his eyes that reminds me of the bad dog at the park. You know, the one that wags its tail but might bite? The observation was so astute, so accurate, that Marcus felt a chill. Your instincts are good, kid. Trust them. That night, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't go to the FBI, not directly. David had too many connections, too much influence. He'd already proven he could manipulate the justice system. But there was another way. Marcus had spent years in Silicon Valley, building networks, making allies. Some of those relationships had survived his fall from grace. People who knew him well enough to believe in his innocence, even when the world didn't. He needed to reach out to someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated, someone with a platform big enough to force the truth into the light, where David couldn't hide from it. Marcus thought of Jennifer Walsh, an investigative journalist he'd briefly dated 3 years ago. They'd ended amicably, and she'd written fair coverage of him even during the scandal. She worked for the Chronicle now, covering financial crimes. But contacting her meant risk. David might be monitoring anyone connected to Marcus. Any communication could tip him off, unless... Marcus looked at Sophie, innocent and trusting. Then he remembered Jimmy from the park, and Ruth from the soup kitchen, and Mrs. Patterson working double shifts in her waitress uniform. He'd built his first company with nothing but an idea and determination. He could do this too. Sophie, Marcus said carefully, how would you like to help me with something really important? Something that would help a lot of people and honor your mama's memory? Sophie sat up straighter, eyes bright. Like hero stuff? Exactly like hero stuff. But it has to be our secret, and you have to trust me completely. Can you do that? Sophie took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. I trust you, Marcus. You're my best friend. And in that moment, Marcus Harrison realized something profound. He'd spent his entire adult life chasing wealth, status, and success. He'd measured his worth in dollars and deals and magazine covers. But sitting on a park bench, homeless and broken, holding hands with a 7-year-old orphan who believed in him, Marcus felt something he'd never felt at the height of his billions. He felt like he mattered. Okay, he said, squeezing her hand gently. Here's what we're going to do. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't know as he began to formulate his plan, was that David Chen had already discovered the empty hiding place under the pier. His people had been watching Marcus for 2 days, waiting to see what he'd do with the evidence, and David had just made a phone call that would change everything. The hunter had become the hunted, and little Sophie Chen, the child selling candy to pay rent, was standing directly in the crossfire. Marcus's plan was simple but dangerous. Sophie would deliver a sealed envelope to Jennifer Walsh at the Chronicle building, saying a homeless man had paid her $5 to drop it off. The envelope contained a burner phone number, one Marcus had bought using his last remaining cash, and a single sentence: I can prove Marcus Harrison is innocent. Meet me. What Marcus didn't know was that David Chen's security team had been following him since he'd left the pier warehouse. They'd seen him with Sophie. They'd photographed them together at the park, and they'd reported everything to David. The morning Sophie was supposed to deliver the envelope, Marcus waited at their meeting spot. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30. Sophie never showed up. Panic seized Marcus's chest. He ran to her apartment building, taking stairs 3 at a time. He pounded on Unit 304. Mrs. Patterson opened the door, her face streaked with tears. Oh God, you've heard? Heard what? Where's Sophie? She's gone. Mrs. Patterson sobbed. David came this morning, said there was an emergency custody hearing, and he was taking Sophie to stay with him temporarily. He had papers, legal documents. I tried to stop him, but he said as her biological uncle, he had rights, and with my financial situation. She broke down completely. Marcus felt the world tilt. When? 2 hours ago. He said it was for Sophie's safety, that there were dangerous people connected to me, and she needed protection. Mrs. Patterson looked at Marcus with sudden suspicion. He mentioned you, said you'd been spending time with her, that you might be dangerous. I would never hurt Sophie, Marcus said desperately. Mrs. Patterson, please. David Chen is the dangerous one. He's the man who framed me, who destroyed my life, and now he has Sophie. Get out, Mrs. Patterson whispered. Just get out before I call the police. Marcus stumbled backward. He couldn't blame her. He was a homeless ex-billionaire accused of fraud, and David was a successful businessman with lawyers and money and legitimacy. Back in the street, Marcus's hands shook as he pulled out the burner phone. He had one card left to play. He dialed the number he'd memorized years ago. Walsh. Jennifer, it's Marcus Harrison. Silence. Then, Marcus, everyone's looking for you. Where are you? I need your help. I have evidence that proves David Chen framed me. Complete evidence, bank records, emails, video testimony, but he just took a 7-year-old girl. Jennifer, he has an innocent child. Slow down. What child? Marcus explained everything in a rush, meeting Sophie on the bridge, discovering she was David's niece, finding Lisa Chen's evidence, and now Sophie's disappearance. Marcus, this is... Jennifer paused. This is huge. But if you're making this up, I'm not. I can prove everything. But we have to move fast. If David thinks Sophie knows something, or that I've involved her, she's in danger. Where's the evidence? Marcus looked at the USB drive in his hand. I have it. But Jennifer, if I give this to you and David finds out before we can publish, he'll disappear, and he'll take Sophie with him. Then we do this smart, Jennifer said, her voice shifting into professional mode. We coordinate with the FBI, we build an airtight case, and we... No. Marcus cut her off. The FBI had months to investigate, and they only saw what David wanted them to see. We need to force his hand, make him panic, make him make a mistake. That's dangerous. I don't care. That little girl saved my life, Jennifer. I'm not letting her pay for it. There was a long pause. Okay, tell me what you need. 24 hours later, Jennifer Walsh's article went live on the Chronicle's website at 6 a.m. The headline screamed, "New evidence suggests Marcus Harrison framed in ConnectStream fraud." Marcus watched from a library computer as the article spread like wildfire across social media. Jennifer had been thorough but strategic, revealing just enough to create doubt about David's narrative without exposing all the evidence. She mentioned the USB drive, the video testimony from a deceased witness, and inconsistencies in the original investigation. Most importantly, she included one crucial paragraph. Sources indicate that the key witness's minor child may possess additional information relevant to the case. Federal authorities are advised to ensure the child's safety and welfare as this investigation unfolds. It was a warning shot, a public declaration that Sophie mattered, that people were watching, that David couldn't simply make her disappear. Marcus's phone rang. Jennifer, "It's exploding," she said. FBI just issued a statement saying they're reviewing new evidence. And Marcus, David Chen just held a press conference. Marcus pulled up the live stream. David stood outside ConnectStream headquarters, looking perfectly composed in an expensive suit. "These allegations are baseless and offensive," David said smoothly. "Mr. Harrison is a desperate man, creating desperate lies. As for the child mentioned in this irresponsible article, my niece Sophie, she's perfectly safe with me while we sort out her permanent custody situation. I won't let her be exploited by a criminal seeking to avoid justice." He was good, calm, confident, playing the protective uncle. But Marcus saw something in David's eyes, something tight and strained. David was worried. "He's going to run," Marcus told Jennifer. "He'll take Sophie and disappear before the FBI can move." "What makes you say that?" "Because it's what I would do. He's already positioned himself as Sophie's guardian. He could be on a plane to a non-extradition country tonight, and no one could stop him legally. By the time the evidence is fully processed, he'd be gone." "Then we need to find them," Jennifer said. "Any idea where he'd take her?" Marcus thought hard. David loved control, security, isolation. He has a house in Napa Valley. Very private, off the main roads. He took me there once for a board retreat. If he's planning to run, he'd stage from there, gather resources, make arrangements. I'll contact the FBI. No time. What if he's already moving? Marcus stood up from the computer. "I'm going there." "Marcus, that's insane. You're not exactly equipped for a rescue mission." "I'm all Sophie has." Marcus ended the call and started walking. He had no car, no money, no weapons, but he had something David had forgotten Marcus possessed: absolute conviction that he had nothing left to lose. It took Marcus 6 hours to get to Napa Valley, hitchhiking with truckers, walking miles between rides, and finally jogging the last 3 miles to David's property as the sun began to set. The house sat on a hillside, surrounded by vineyards, beautiful and isolated, perfect for privacy. Marcus approached carefully, staying low in the vineyard rows. 2 black SUVs sat in the driveway. Lights were on in the main house. As he crept closer, he heard voices through an open window. "Uncle David, when can I go home?" Sophie's voice, small and scared. "Soon, sweetheart. I just need to handle some business first. You're safe here with me. But I want Aunt Lisa, and I want Marcus." A pause. Then David's voice, harder now. "Marcus is a bad man, Sophie. He's been lying to you, using you." "No." Sophie's voice was fierce. "Marcus is my friend. He saved me. He's been filling your head with nonsense. Did he ask you about your mother? About things she might have left behind?" Silence. Marcus held his breath. "Sophie, I know your mother took something from my office, something very important. If Marcus has it, I need it back. Did he say anything about a USB drive, a computer file?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Sophie's voice trembled. "Sophie." David's tone turned cold. "I'm trying to be patient, but this is serious. If you're protecting Marcus, you're making a very big mistake. Now, did your mother leave any work materials? Any files or—" "I said I don't know!" Sophie shouted, and Marcus heard something crash. That was it. Marcus couldn't wait any longer. He picked up a rock from the vineyard and hurled it through the living room window. Glass shattered. Men shouted. Marcus ran around to the front door and kicked it open, his shoulder screaming in pain from the impact. The scene inside froze like a photograph. Sophie stood in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face. David stood over her, one hand raised. 2 security guards reached for weapons. "Sophie, run!" Marcus shouted. Everything happened at once. Sophie bolted toward Marcus. One guard lunged for her. David shouted orders. Marcus grabbed Sophie and shoved her behind him as the second guard tackled him to the ground. Pain exploded through Marcus's body as fists connected with his ribs, his face. He tried to fight back, but he was weak from weeks on the street, malnourished and exhausted. "Enough!" David's voice cut through the chaos. The beating stopped. Marcus lay on the floor, tasting blood, Sophie crying beside him. David crouched down, his face a mask of cold fury. "You've made this so much more complicated than it needed to be, Marcus. I was actually going to let you live, take the fall, serve your time, and eventually fade into obscurity. But you couldn't leave well enough alone." "You won't get away with this," Marcus gasped. David smiled. "I already have. The article changes nothing." It's your word, a desperate homeless fraud against mine. Even with Lisa's little insurance policy, I have lawyers who'll bury this in litigation for years. By then, I'll be in a country that doesn't extradite, living comfortably on the 800 million I've hidden away. And Sophie? Marcus asked. Sophie comes with me. She's my niece. Who's going to stop me from taking her on an extended international vacation? David stood up. In fact, our flight to Dubai leaves in 3 hours. I've already packed her things. No! Sophie screamed. I won't go with you. You're mean and scary, and I hate you. David's facade cracked for just a moment, and Marcus saw the monster underneath. You'll do what you're told, little girl, just like your mother should have. My mama was brave, Sophie sobbed. She was braver than you'll ever be. David's hand shot out and grabbed Sophie's arm, yanking her away from Marcus. Sophie screamed. Something inside Marcus snapped. With his last reserves of strength, he launched himself at David, tackling him away from Sophie. They crashed into a glass coffee table. David roared in pain and rage. The security guards pulled Marcus off, but not before Marcus had accomplished his goal. Sophie had run out the front door. Get her! Get! David screamed, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Get that child now! One guard ran after Sophie. The other raised his fist to hit Marcus again, and then sirens split the air. Red and blue lights flooded the driveway. FBI! Hands where we can see them! The FBI raid was swift and overwhelming. Agents poured into the house, weapons drawn. The security guards were immediately detained. David Chen was pulled to his feet and read his rights, his face a mask of shock and fury. Marcus, bleeding and barely conscious on the floor, heard a small voice cry out, Marcus! Sophie burst past an FBI agent and threw herself on him, sobbing. I was so scared. I ran and hid in the vineyard, and then the police came and I told them you were here and... It's okay, kid, Marcus whispered, wrapping his arms around her. You're safe now. You did so good. Mr. Harrison? An FBI agent knelt beside them. I'm Special Agent Rebecca Torres. We need to get you medical attention. Dim, the USB drive, Marcus said urgently. Jennifer Walsh has it, the evidence. We know. Ms. Walsh contacted us hours ago with everything. We've been building our case all day. Your article forced our hand to move faster than we wanted, but... Agent Torres glanced at David, now in handcuffs. We got him. As paramedics arrived and began treating Marcus's injuries, he watched David Chen being led away. David's eyes met his for one brief moment, filled with pure venom. This isn't over, David mouthed silently. But it was. Marcus could feel it. Over the next hour, as Marcus was treated for broken ribs, a concussion and various cuts and bruises, Agent Torres explained everything. Jennifer's article had done more than create publicity. It had prompted 3 other former ConnectStream employees to come forward with their own evidence of David's fraud. Combined with Lisa Chen's USB drive and video testimony, the FBI had built an airtight case. We've frozen all of David Chen's accounts, domestic and international, Torres said. We've arrested 4 of his co-conspirators, and we've recovered approximately 600 million of the stolen funds. The rest will take time, but we'll find it. And Marcus? Sophie asked from where she sat beside his hospital bed, refusing to leave his side. Is Marcus in trouble? Torres smiled gently. No, sweetheart. Marcus is a victim, not a criminal. All charges against him will be dropped. In fact, based on the evidence, it's clear he had no knowledge of the fraud. Mr. Harrison, you're a free man. The words didn't feel real. After weeks of hell, of losing everything, of sleeping on streets and eating from garbage cans, Marcus was suddenly free. There is one more thing, Torres said, pulling out a tablet. We found this in David Chen's safe. I think you should see it. She pressed play. It was security footage from ConnectStream headquarters, dated 3 months before the investigation began. In it, David Chen could clearly be seen entering Marcus's office late at night, using Marcus's computer and forging his digital signature on dozens of documents. "He recorded himself?" Marcus asked, stunned. "Insurance," Torres said. "In case he ever needed leverage. Criminals like Chen always keep evidence to protect themselves. They just never think it'll be used against them." As the video ended, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not relief, not vindication, but something deeper. Peace. "What happens to Sophie now?" Marcus asked quietly. Torres's expression softened. "That's complicated. Mrs. Patterson is her legal guardian, but given the circumstances and David's manipulation of the system, we need to ensure Sophie's safety while this case proceeds. Social services will—" "No." Sophie's voice was small but firm. She looked up at Marcus with those impossibly wise brown eyes. "I want to stay with Marcus." Marcus's heart clenched. "Sophie, I don't have anything. No home, no money. Everything is frozen until the investigation concludes. I can't take care of you the way you deserve." "You already do," Sophie said simply. "You protected me. You came for me even when it was dangerous. That's what family does." Agent Torres looked between them. "Mr. Harrison, once your assets are unfrozen and your name is cleared, would you be interested in pursuing custody?" Marcus looked at this little girl who had saved his life on a bridge, who had given him her last chocolate bar, who had believed in him when no one else would. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking. "Yes, I would, if that's what Sophie wants." Sophie threw her arms around him, careful of his injuries. "It's what I want. You're my family now, Marcus. Just like Mama said, the love we give keeps living in the people we touch. You and me, we're touching each other's hearts. That makes us family." For the second time since meeting Sophie, Marcus Harrison cried, but this time they were tears of joy. 3 months later, Marcus stood in a federal courtroom as David Chen was sentenced to 35 years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and a dozen other charges. David's empire had crumbled completely. Investigators had uncovered a web of corruption spanning a decade, affecting thousands of investors and employees. The man who had seemed untouchable was now facing the rest of his life behind bars. As David was led away, he looked at Marcus one last time. The hatred in his eyes had faded, replaced by something else: defeat, resignation. The look of a man who'd gambled everything and lost. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed Marcus. "Mr. Harrison, how does it feel to be vindicated? What's next for you? Will you rebuild Connect Stream?" Marcus held up his hand for quiet. "I have a statement to prepare, but not right now. Right now, I have somewhere more important to be." He pushed through the crowd to where Sophie waited with Mrs. Patterson. The custody arrangement had been finalized last week. Sophie would live with Marcus, with regular visits to her Aunt Lisa. Marcus had his assets unfrozen, his reputation restored. Multiple venture capital firms had already approached him about funding new projects. His net worth, while nowhere near what it had been, was still substantial after the recovery of stolen funds. But none of that mattered as much as the little girl holding his hand. "Can we get ice cream?" Sophie asked as they walked away from the courthouse. "Absolutely," Marcus said. "The biggest sundae they have. With extra chocolate. With everything." As they walked down the San Francisco street, the same city where Marcus had almost ended his life 3 months ago, he thought about everything that had changed. He'd lost billions of dollars. He'd lost his company, his reputation, his pride. But he'd gained something infinitely more valuable. He'd gained purpose, family, love, and a 7-year-old girl who reminded him every single day that life was worth living. "Marcus," Sophie asked as they entered the ice cream shop. "Yeah, kid. Do you think Mama would be proud of me for being brave and helping catch the bad guys?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his eyes shining. "Sophie, your Mama would be so incredibly proud of you. You honored her memory in the best possible way. You were brave, you were kind, and you saved lives, including mine." Sophie smiled, that brilliant smile that lit up the whole world. "I think she's watching us right now, from heaven. And I think she's happy we found each other." "I think so too, kid. I think so too." They got their ice cream, massive sundaes with chocolate sauce and whipped cream and cherries on top. As they ate, Sophie chatted about her plans for her new bedroom in Marcus's apartment, about starting at a new school, about maybe getting a puppy. Marcus listened to every word, savoring the normalcy, the joy, the simple pleasure of being alive and present. His phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer Walsh. "Congratulations on the sentencing. Dinner to celebrate?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Rain check. I have a date with my daughter." He paused before hitting send, then changed it to, "Rain check. I'm having ice cream with my family." That felt more true. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting golden light through the ice cream shop windows, Marcus Harrison realized something profound. 3 months ago, he'd stood on the Golden Gate Bridge, ready to end everything because he'd lost his billions and his status. Now, sitting in a cheap ice cream parlor with a 7-year-old orphan who'd become his entire world, Marcus was richer than he'd ever been in his life because he'd learned what actually mattered, not money, not success, not reputation, but connection, love, purpose, and the courage to keep living even when it felt impossible. "Marcus," Sophie asked, chocolate sauce on her nose. "Yeah? I'm glad you didn't jump that night." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Me too, kid. Me too." But even as they finished their ice cream and headed home to start their new life together, neither of them knew that the story wasn't quite finished. David Chen had one final card to play. And in a prison cell that night, as guards made their rounds, David Chen placed a phone call to someone who owed him a favor. Someone who was very, very angry about losing $800 million. Someone who believed that Marcus Harrison needed to pay for his interference. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning a new round. 6 months after David Chen's sentencing, Marcus stood in his new office overlooking San Francisco Bay, his company, Second Chances, Inc. We helped people rebuild their lives after losing everything. The irony wasn't lost on him. Sophie burst through the door. "Marcus, I got 100% on my math test." Marcus examined the paper covered in gold stars. "Sophie, that's amazing." Life had settled into a beautiful routine. Sophie thrived in school. The nightmares had faded, and Marcus had legally adopted her 2 months ago. Mrs. Patterson visited every Sunday. Jimmy from the park now ran Marcus's outreach program. Ruth from the soup kitchen sat on the board. Marcus had taken his broken pieces and built something that mattered. But that evening, as they walked home, a black car pulled up beside them. "Mr. Harrison, someone wants to talk to you." The man's cold eyes flicked to Sophie. "David Chen says come alone to Pier 39 tonight, or the girl pays." The car drove away. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. Pier 39, midnight, alone, or Sophie pays the price." Attached was a photo of Sophie taken outside her school. Marcus called Agent Torres immediately. "Don't go," Torres said. "Let us handle this." "He threatened Sophie. I can't risk it." "Then we'll have agents watching. Be careful, Marcus." At 11:30, Marcus approached Pier 39. The pier was dark except for scattered security lights. Sea lions barked in the distance. "Marcus Harrison!" A voice emerged from shadows near the carousel. A figure stepped into the light. Not a hired thug. David Chen himself. "How? You're supposed to be in prison," Marcus said. David smiled coldly. "Guards can be bought. Transfer papers forged. When you have 800 million hidden in the right places, even federal prison isn't foolproof." He pulled out a gun. Marcus raised his hands. "David, this is insane. You'll never get away. I don't care about getting away anymore. David's voice was hollow. You destroyed my life, Marcus. Everything I built, 35 years in prison. Do you know what that does to a man? You did this to yourself, Marcus said carefully. You committed the crimes. You framed me. You threatened a child. I was protecting myself, David roared. Lisa was going to ruin everything. I had no choice. You always had a choice, Marcus said quietly, just like I had a choice that night on the bridge. David's hand trembled. You should have jumped. But no, you had to survive, had to play hero, had to take my niece and turn her against me. Sophie chose love over fear, something you never understood. Don't talk to me about love. David's voice cracked, and now my blood lives with the man who destroyed me. Marcus could see movement in the shadows. FBI agents getting into position. He needed to keep David talking. What's the end game? You shoot me, you go back to prison for life. Is that worth it? I've lost everything already, David laughed bitterly. My freedom, my reputation, my family. So yes, Marcus, taking you with me is worth it. Sophie doesn't hate you, Marcus said. She's 7 years old, David. She still asks about you sometimes. David's composure cracked. Tears streamed down his face. Of course I loved her. She was Lisa's daughter. I never meant for things to go this far. So stop now, Marcus said gently. Put down the gun. Show Sophie that even when we fall, we can try to make it right. It's too late, David whispered. He raised the gun higher. Uncle David. Everyone froze. Sophie stood at the pier entrance, Agent Torres trying to hold her back. But Sophie wrenched free and ran forward. Sophie, no! Marcus shouted. She ran straight to David, tears streaming down her face. Please don't hurt Marcus, she sobbed. He's my family now. He's all I have left. David stared down at his niece, the gun wavering. Sophie, you shouldn't be here. I know you're hurt, Sophie said, her voice trembling but steady. Mama used to say that hurt people, but she also said that loved people love people. And Uncle David, I still love you. Even after everything, because Mama loved you, and she taught me that love doesn't just stop. David's face crumbled, the gun lowered. I'm so sorry, Sophie, he choked out. I'm so sorry about your mother. About everything. You can stop now, Sophie said, reaching out her hand. Please, Uncle David, just stop. For a long moment, David stood frozen. Then slowly he lowered the gun. FBI agents swarmed in, tackling David, securing the weapon. As they cuffed him, David's eyes stayed on Sophie. I'm sorry, he whispered. Tell your mother I'm sorry. Sophie nodded through tears. I will. When I visit her grave, I'll tell her. As they led David away, Marcus pulled Sophie into his arms. That was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous. Don't ever scare me like that again. I had to try, Sophie said. That's what family does. Agent Torres approached. That child just talked down an armed fugitive. Mr. Harrison, it's really over now. Chen's going to maximum security. No more escapes. You and Sophie are safe. As they walked away from Pier 39, Sophie looked up at Marcus. Can we go to the bridge, where we really met, where everything started? 20 minutes later, they stood on the Golden Gate Bridge, right where Marcus had been ready to jump 6 months ago. The wind whipped around them, but everything was different now. This is where I found you, Sophie said softly. You saved my life that night, kid. Sophie was quiet for a moment. I think maybe we saved each other. You were sad and needed a reason to live. I was sad and needed someone to love me. We were both kind of broken, but together we got fixed. Marcus knelt beside her. Your mama was right, Sophie. The love we give keeps living in the people we touch. She gave you so much love, and you passed it on to me. And now I get to pass it right back to you every single day. Forever and ever, Sophie asked. Forever and ever. They stood watching the lights of San Francisco sparkle across the bay. a city that had nearly witnessed Marcus's end, but instead became the place where his real life began. "Marcus?" Sophie asked as they turned to leave. "Yeah? When I grow up, I want to help people like we do, people who are sad or lost or need someone to believe in them." Marcus smiled, his heart full. "You already do that, kid. Every single day." As they walked hand in hand off the Golden Gate Bridge, together this time as a family, Marcus thought about everything he'd lost and gained. He'd lost billions, a tech empire, status and reputation. He'd gained a daughter, purpose, real friends, and understanding of what actually mattered. The trade wasn't even close. Marcus Harrison had stood on this bridge 6 months ago, ready to die, because he'd lost everything that defined him. Now he understood that he'd never really had anything of value until he lost it all, because the most valuable things, love, family, purpose, connection, could never be taken by fraud or measured in net worth. Those things could only be given freely from one broken heart to another. As they drove home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, her hand clutching Marcus's. And Marcus Harrison, former billionaire, current father and founder of a company dedicated to second chances, smiled. Because he finally understood what Sophie had tried to tell him that first night. Their lives weren't just for them. Every person they'd meet, every smile they'd give, every kind thing they'd do, it all mattered. And even when they were gone, the love they gave would keep living in the people they touched. That was the real fortune. That was what made life worth living. The end.